There's a moment that stands out in my memory, a moment that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. It wasn't like waking up from a vivid dream, it was more like realizing that everything you've ever known was part of an elaborate illusion. It was the day I discovered that I had been living in a parallel universe, one that was meticulously crafted, much like the intricate worlds you might see in a show like Westworld, but with its own distinct characters and hidden truths. It all began on what seemed like an ordinary day. I found myself in a place that felt familiar yet subtly different, as if everything around me had been fine-tuned to a level of perfection that was almost unsettling. The sky was a little too blue, the clouds too perfectly shaped, and the people around me, they were flawless, almost to the point of being unnatural. It was as if I had stepped into a world where every detail had been carefully designed, every interaction scripted. The people in this world were intriguing. There was John, the charismatic leader who seemed to have an uncanny ability to know what I was thinking before I even spoke. He was always a step ahead, guiding conversations in ways that left me feeling both intrigued and slightly unnerved. Then there was Maria, a woman with a mysterious past that she only hinted at, each revelation feeling like a carefully placed breadcrumb leading to some deeper truth. And finally there was Caleb, a stoic and silent figure who seemed to be my protector, though I couldn't shake the feeling that his true role was something else entirely, perhaps to watch over me, or even to keep me in check. For a while, I played along. I engaged with these people, followed the routines of this world, and tried to convince myself that this was just a strange phase, something that would pass. But deep down I knew something was off. There was an underlying current of unease, a sense that I was part of something much bigger, something I couldn't fully understand. One day, while talking to John, I decided to test the waters. His confidence and the way he seemed to know more about me than I did myself had always bothered me. "John," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "do you ever feel like we're being watched? Like our lives aren't entirely our own?" For a moment something flickered in John's eyes, something that made me think he was struggling to stay in character. It was just a split second, but it was enough. "It's funny you ask that," he replied, his tone softer, almost conspiratorial. "Sometimes it feels like we're part of something much bigger, something we can't control." That was the first time anyone in this world had hinted at the truth. It was like a crack in the facade, and I knew I had to explore it further. I started to push the boundaries of this reality, doing things that didn't fit the script, wandering off the beaten path, interacting with people in ways that defied social norms. The results were both fascinating and disturbing. Some people would glitch, repeating their actions or words as if stuck in a loop. Others would simply ignore me as if I didn't exist. The more I explored, the more I realized that this world was a carefully constructed illusion, a parallel universe where I was the subject of an elaborate experiment. But why? And who was behind it? As I delved deeper into the mystery of this world, I began to notice more anomalies. Objects would appear out of place, conversations would reset as if someone had hit a rewind button, and there were moments where the entire environment would shimmer, as if struggling to maintain its form. It was as though the world was being held together by some unseen force, one that was beginning to fray at the edges. I started to piece together the clues, tracing them back to their origin. Every time something unusual happened, it seemed to be connected to a specific area in the city, a place that people rarely spoke about and even more rarely visited. It was a towering structure in the center of the city, a building that seemed to pulse with energy, casting a faint, almost imperceptible hum that resonated in my bones. Determined to uncover the truth, I made my way to the building one night when the streets were deserted. As I approached, I felt a strange pull, as if the building was drawing me in, beckoning me to discover its secrets. The doors opened easily, almost as if it was expecting me, and I stepped into a vast, dimly lit atrium. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could hear the hum growing louder, more insistent. I followed the sound deeper and deeper into the building until I reached a large circular chamber. In the center of the room was a console surrounded by screens that displayed scenes from the world I had been living in. But these weren't just random images. They were specific moments from my life, captured and catalogued, with meticulous detail. It was then that I realized the full extent of what was happening. I wasn't just living in a parallel universe, I was being watched, monitored, and studied. Every action I took, every decision I made was being recorded and analyzed by someone or something beyond my understanding. It was as if my life was an experiment, one designed to observe how I would react to this artificial reality. As I stood there staring at the screens, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see Caleb, the stoic figure who had always been by my side, standing in the doorway. But this time there was something different about him. His usually impassive face showed a hint of emotion. Regret, perhaps, or sadness. "You weren't supposed to find this place," he said quietly, his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "But now that you have, there's no turning back." "What is this place?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the empty chamber. "Why am I here? Who's behind all of this?" Caleb sighed, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. "This is a control center, the heart of the experiment. You're living in a simulation, a carefully crafted reality designed to study the nature of choice, free will, and human behavior. You've been placed here to see how you would respond, to observe the decisions you make when faced with the unknown." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "But why me? What's the purpose of all this?" "You were chosen," Caleb replied, his eyes locking with mine. "Chosen because you have the potential to see beyond the surface, to question the reality you're given. But there's more to it than that. This experiment isn't just about you. It's about understanding something much bigger, something that goes beyond our world." The realization hit me like a tidal wave. Everything I had known, everything I had believed about my life was a lie. I wasn't living in a real world. I was a subject in an experiment, a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. But even as the shock of this revelation washed over me, I felt a growing sense of determination. I couldn't let this be the end. I had to find out who was behind this, who had created this world, and for what purpose. I turned back to the screen, scanning the images for anything that might give me a clue. Then I saw it, a series of numbers flashing across the screen, a pattern that repeated itself over and over. It was a code, one that I instinctively knew was the key to unlocking the final truth. Caleb watched me closely as I began to input the code into the console. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "Once you unlock this, there's no going back." I hesitated for only a moment before pressing the final button. The room around us began to shake, the walls vibrating with an energy that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The screens flickered and went dark, and for a moment I thought everything might collapse around me. But then, in the center of the room, a portal began to open, a swirling vortex of light and shadow that seemed to stretch into infinity. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the roar of the vortex. Caleb's expression was unreadable. "That's the gateway to the source, the entity that created this world. If you want answers, that's where you'll find them." With a deep breath, I stepped forward, feeling the pull of the vortex as it drew me in. The world around me dissolved into a blur of colors and sounds, and then, just as suddenly as it began, the chaos subsided. I found myself standing in a vast, empty void, surrounded by nothingness, but I wasn't alone. In the distance, I saw a figure, an immense, radiant presence that seemed to pulse with pure energy. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a being of light and consciousness that defied all understanding. This was it, the entity that had created the parallel universe I had been living in. I approached cautiously, feeling a mixture of awe and fear. The entity's presence was overwhelming, its power palpable in the air. But as I drew closer, I realized that it wasn't just an entity, it was something more. It was the source of all life, the consciousness that connected every living being across every universe. The entity didn't speak in words, but in thoughts, images, and feelings that filled my mind. It showed me the vastness of the multiverse, the countless parallel realities that existed side by side, each one a variation of another. It revealed that the world I had been living in was just one of many, a place where it could observe, learn, and perhaps even guide the evolution of consciousness. As the images flashed through my mind, I began to understand the true nature of the entity. It wasn't just a creator, it was a guardian, a being tasked with maintaining balance across the multiverse. Each parallel universe was a piece of a larger puzzle, and the entity's role was to ensure that all of these pieces fit together in harmony, but there was more. The entity also showed me that the simulation I'd been living in wasn't just an experiment, it was a test, a way to determine if I could perceive the deeper truths that lay beneath the surface of reality. It was designed to push me, to challenge my understanding of the world, and to see if I could rise above the illusion and find the truth. And then the entity gave me a choice. I could return to the life I had known before, back to the reality I once believed was real, or I could stay in this world, continuing to explore the mysteries of the multiverse. But there was a catch. If I chose to stay, I would have to accept the limitations of this world, the fact that I was not entirely free, that my actions were still part of a larger design. I stood there contemplating the enormity of the decision before me. To return would mean forgetting everything I had learned, living in blissful ignorance. But to stay meant embracing the uncertainty, the challenges, and the responsibilities that came with this new understanding. Finally, I made my choice. I chose to stay, not because I wanted to live under someone else's control, but because I believed that even within the confines of this world I could find meaning, purpose, and perhaps even a way to influence the course of events. I realized that the key to true freedom wasn't in escaping the simulation, but in understanding it, in using the knowledge I'd gained to shape my own destiny. With my decision made, the entity's light began to fade, and I found myself back in the control room, standing next to Caleb. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and respect, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. "You made the right choice," he said quietly. "This world isn't perfect, but it's where you're meant to be. There's so much more to discover, so much more to learn." From that day forward, I approached life with a renewed sense of purpose. I continued to face challenges, but they no longer felt insurmountable. I understood that each obstacle was an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to align more closely with my true self. And as I walked this path, I began to experience a level of success that I had never imagined possible. Not in the form of wealth or accolades, but in the deep, abiding satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with my higher purpose. The presence of the entity, though no longer visible, remained with me. It was a constant source of guidance and support, helping me navigate the complexities of the world I now knew was a simulation. And though I still had moments of doubt and fear, I knew that I was on the right path, and that true success was not something I would find outside of myself, but something I would cultivate within. The journey was far from over. There were still mysteries to uncover, challenges to face, and truths to discover, but I was no longer afraid. I'd seen beyond the illusion, and I knew that whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it. After all, in a world where reality is fluid, where the boundaries between truth and illusion are constantly shifting, the only thing that truly matters is the path you choose to walk, and the impact you leave behind as you walk it.